At exactly 11:17 on a bright Saturday morning, a woman ran across the crowded city park carrying a little boy's blue backpack in one hand and tears in her eyes. She stopped in front of a tired-looking single father sitting beneath an old oak tree and whispered the strangest request he had ever heard, "Please, be my child's dad for one day." The man stared at her, completely confused. Then he looked toward the little boy standing behind her, clutching a broken toy airplane and watching him with frightened eyes. The father slowly stood up and asked the only question that made sense. "Tell me why." Before we begin, if you believe kindness can change a life and everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Heart Kindness Tales. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the moment someone remembers for the rest of their life. The single father's name was Calder, a quiet 38-year-old man who had learned to live with exhaustion without complaining about it. Every morning, he woke before sunrise in the small apartment he shared with his 8-year-old daughter, Marin. He packed her lunch, braided her hair as carefully as he could, checked her homework, and rushed to his job at a neighborhood auto repair shop. Calder had become a father alone 3 years earlier after losing his wife to a sudden illness, and although he never talked much about the pain, it lived quietly in everything he did. He still kept her favorite mug in the kitchen cabinet. He still sometimes caught himself turning toward the passenger seat of his old car as if expecting to see her there. But his daughter needed him, so he had learned to smile even on mornings when his heart felt like an empty room. That Saturday, Calder had promised Marin a simple day at the park. Money was tight, and there were no expensive restaurants or amusement parks in their plans. They had brought sandwiches, 2 bottles of lemonade, and a small blanket that had been repaired so many times that Marin jokingly called it their magic carpet. She was running across the grass when Calder noticed the woman approaching him. She looked exhausted, though she couldn't have been more than 35. Her name was Selene Hart. Beside her stood a little boy named Kellan, perhaps 6 years old, wearing a pale yellow shirt and holding a toy airplane with one wing missing. Selene looked at Calder as if she had been searching for him for hours. Her breathing was uneven, and her hands trembled. She glanced at Marin, then back at Calder, and finally explained that her son Kellan had been asking questions about his father all morning. His father had promised to come to the park that day, but once again he had disappeared. Selene had spent years protecting her son from the truth, telling him that his father loved him but was busy. That morning, however, Kellan had found an old photograph and asked why every other child in the picture had someone holding their hand except him. Selene had no answer that would not break his heart. She had seen Calder earlier that morning while walking past the park. She had watched him kneel beside Marin, tie her shoelace, wipe a little dirt from her cheek, and listen patiently while she told him a long story about a butterfly. Selene said something about the way he looked at his daughter had made her realize that Kellan didn't need an expensive gift or a perfect explanation. He simply needed to know what it felt like to have a father who showed up. That was when she made the impossible request. She asked Calder to pretend to be Kellan's father for one day. Calder immediately felt uncomfortable. He looked at Kellan, then at Selene, and explained that he didn't want to lie to a child. Selene lowered her eyes and admitted that she understood. She wasn't asking him to replace anyone. She only wanted Kellan to experience one ordinary afternoon with a father figure before she told him the truth about his real father. Calder almost said no. He had spent years teaching Marin that honesty mattered, and pretending to be someone else felt wrong. Then Kellan's little voice stopped him. The boy quietly asked whether Calder really knew how to fly paper airplanes. Calder looked at the broken toy in the child's hands and smiled. He told him he knew a thing or two about airplanes. Kellan's face changed instantly. For the first time that morning, there was a spark in his eyes. Calder agreed. What followed seemed simple at first. They walked toward the lake, and Calder showed Kellan how to fold a paper airplane from an old newspaper page. Marin joined them, and within minutes the 3 children and adults were laughing as the airplanes flew across the grass. Kellan kept running after his plane, shouting that his dad had made it fly farther than anyone else's. Every time he said that word, Calder felt something tighten inside his chest. He knew it wasn't true. But he also knew the boy had needed that word for longer than Calder could understand. They ate lunch together beneath the trees. Kellan asked Calder endless questions. Did he know how to fix bicycles? Could he swim? Did he know how to build a treehouse? Did he ever get scared? Calder answered each question honestly except the ones that made his throat tighten. When Kellan asked whether fathers ever left, Calder looked toward Selene. She was sitting several feet away, silently crying. After lunch, Kellan wanted to ride the small amusement train that traveled around the park. Selene looked worried because she hadn't brought enough money. Calder quietly paid for the tickets before she could object. He sat beside Kellan while Marin sat on the other side, and as the little train moved through the sunny park, Kellan leaned against Calder's shoulder. For a few minutes, everything felt strangely peaceful. Then Kellan asked a question that shattered the afternoon. He asked Calder whether he would still be his dad tomorrow. Calder couldn't answer. The train continued moving while sunlight flickered through the trees. Selene covered her mouth and looked away. Calder gently placed his hand on Kellan's shoulder and told him that sometimes people can care about each other deeply even when they cannot stay forever. Kellan didn't understand. He only wanted to know why grown-ups always made things complicated. Calder knew that question because he had asked it himself after losing his wife. As the afternoon continued, Kellan became quieter. He sat beside the lake with his broken airplane in his lap. Eventually, Selene sat beside him and told him the truth about his father. She explained that his father had chosen not to be part of their lives, and none of that was Kellan's fault. She told him that being abandoned didn't mean he was unlovable. Kellan cried. So did Selene. And Calder stood nearby, fighting tears of his own. He had thought he was helping a stranger's child for one afternoon. He hadn't realized he was also confronting the deepest wound inside himself. When Kellan finally stopped crying, he walked toward Calder and handed him the broken airplane. He asked whether Calder could fix it. Calder took the toy carefully. He examined the missing wing and told him that some things could be repaired, even if they were never exactly the same again. Kellan smiled and said that maybe people were like that too. The words hit Calder harder than anything else that day. Before sunset, Selene thanked him and apologized for asking such an impossible favor. Calder told her she didn't need to apologize. He admitted that he had once believed being strong meant carrying pain alone. But watching Kellan had reminded him that sometimes strength meant allowing someone else to help you carry it. Selene asked whether he regretted saying yes. Calder looked at Kellan, who was now laughing with Marin near the fountain, and shook his head. He didn't regret it at all. The next morning, Calder found a small paper airplane tucked beneath his apartment door. On its wing, written in uneven handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for showing up." Calder stood in the hallway for a long time. Then he noticed Marin watching him from the doorway. She smiled and asked if he was going to keep the airplane. He told her yes. Because it reminded him of something he had almost forgotten. Showing up mattered. Years later, Calder would still keep that paper airplane inside the same drawer where he kept his wife's old photographs. It became a reminder that families are not always created by blood, and sometimes a person can enter your life for only one afternoon and still leave behind a lesson that lasts forever. Selene and Kellan eventually became close friends with Calder and Marin. There was no pretending after that day. Kellan knew Calder wasn't his biological father, but he also knew something more important. Calder was someone who answered when he called. Someone who listened. Someone who showed up. And for a little boy who had spent his childhood waiting for someone to choose him, that meant everything. Months later, Kellan stood on a school stage during a family appreciation ceremony. Other children walked forward with parents and grandparents. When Kellan's name was called, he looked into the audience and saw Selene standing beside Calder and Marin. He smiled. Then he walked toward them. He didn't call Calder his pretend dad anymore. He simply called him family. And Calder finally understood why Selene had approached him that sunny morning. She hadn't really been asking him to pretend to be someone's father. She had been asking him to show a lonely child what it felt like when someone chose to stay. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and subscribe to Heart Kindness Tales for more stories that remind us that one small act of compassion can change an entire life. And before you leave, here is one special request. Comment "I believe in second chances" if you believe every child deserves to feel loved, seen, and never forgotten. Because sometimes, you don't need to save the whole world. Sometimes, you only need to show up for one person at the exact moment they are wondering if anyone cares. And sometimes, one day is enough to change a lifetime.